I think it's important for us to address, I think that many times when it comes to stewardship, we approach stewardship as a budgetary issue. So in other words, the church has a budget, and there are so many dollars that it needs to raise from stewardship in order to meet its budget. And so we kind of think about, or we're told, what is our piece of the pie, so to speak, to meet the budget. But I want us to think about stewardship in a different way. Because stewardship is not, at its core, about the church meeting its budget. Although certainly that's a byproduct of a healthy stewardship program within a parish, and stewards that are giving generously within the parish. Not only that the budget will be met, but that we'll have an abundance and be able to really make an impact in the world. But as stewardship at its core is about a response. In other words, God has blessed each and every one of us in our own way and in our own measure. And each of us in our stewardship of those gifts has to look at how we've been blessed and to respond. And what this means, and what we're encouraging people to do this year, is to offer, instead of a set amount or a flat amount, a proportion of their gifts that they have received from God. This is a scriptural tenet. This is something that we find in the Bible. In the Old Testament, it was called the tithe. The tithe was God's command to the people to give 1/10 of their goods to the temple, to God through the temple. We see this first in Genesis, when Abraham defeats one of the pagan kings of those nations, and he takes the spoils from his victory. And on the way home, he's met by King Melchizedek, who's the priest of Salem. So he is a king and priest, and Salem, of course, in Hebrew meaning peace, right? So he's the king of peace, and he's the king and priest. And so Melchizedek is this foreshadowing of Christ. And we know this because Melchizedek comes out and he offers Abraham two things: bread and wine. Where have we seen that before, right? So Melchizedek is like Christ. He's an image of Christ. And Abraham, out of his response to the God's blessings of granting him the victory in the battle, he gives to him 1/10 of the spoils to King Melchizedek. Similarly, when Jacob sees the vision of the ladder, he prays to God and he promises to God that if his mission is blessed and he accomplishes what he came to do, that he would give to God 1/10. So we have that proportion model. And God in the law commands too that the Israelites all give 1/10. And yet we have in the New Testament Christ, who is never afraid to take things to the next level, right? He's never satisfied to just leave things at the state of the law. We have in the New Testament, right, think about Zacchaeus, the tax collector. And he says to Christ, the half of my goods I give to the poor. Right? In his moment of repentance, says the half of my goods I give to the poor. And even more astonishingly, Christ says to the young rich man who comes to him, the young ruler, right? He says, if you want to be perfect, sell everything that you have and give it to the poor. And come follow me, and you will have riches in heaven. So this proportion model ranges from anywhere from 10% in the Old Testament all the way to all in, all the chips on the table, right? Christ telling the young rich ruler that we have to sell everything if we want to be perfect. Now, approaching stewardship in this way is a benefit to us. And it has three main components to that benefit. The first is that when we think about the things and ponder on the things that God has blessed us with, and then we give a proportion back to God through the church or by helping the poor, it cultivates within us a spirit of gratitude. In other words, we have to see first all of God's blessings and really how abundant God has blessed us throughout the past year or in the year to come, right? We look and identify all the things that God has done for us, and we say, wow, God truly has blessed me and my family. And it's in this spirit of gratitude that we then can turn and be generous with those gifts, with others, with the church, with whatever, wherever we, in our hearts, give outside of ourselves. And so we cultivate this generosity, which leads to joy. Generosity and joy are linked. So it's not surprised what I said last week, how people who are generous in their lives lead joyful lives. The second is that it creates a synergy between us and God. In other words, we can approach God like an ATM. ATM, you put the card in the machine and you push how much money you want to come out and it just dispenses, right? A lot of people approach God that way, where they think that they can say certain prayers or do certain things or live in a certain way, and the gifts are they're just got the hand out like this. They're just waiting for God to continually put stuff in their hands. This is transactional, okay? This is not the way that we are to relate to God, who is our Father in heaven. God forbid. Instead, we receive His blessings out of His love. He's not obligated to give us anything. Out of His love, He has blessed us. And we receive with joy these gifts, and we have that gratitude, and so we then give it back to Him. And we have now a cycle of God blessing us and us giving back, and God blessing us again and God giving back. And so instead of our life being a transactional one with God, it becomes a synergy where we work together with God for the salvation of our souls and for His gospel to go throughout the world. The third thing is that God continues then to send blessings upon us. Not in the way that the prosperity gospel preachers preach, which is that if I live a good life and I support the church, that God will bless me with vacation homes in Tahiti and, to drive Bentleys and like all these crazy things, because that's nowhere in the Scriptures. That has nothing to do with Christianity. But God continues to send His blessings upon His people who are working with Him, who have that synergy with Him. And those blessings are peace, joy, faithfulness, prayer, repentance. All the things that we're looking for in this life, they come to us when we have that gratitude, have that synergy with God. Then God continues to send those blessings upon us. Our blessings are multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. In the prophetic book of Micah, God says, test me. He says, test me. Give the tithe and test me. And see if the gates of heaven themselves don't open up. And I pour out my blessings so abundantly that there's nothing that can contain them. And so God says, if you're willing to sacrifice of your life, because stewardship is not just about money, it's about our whole life. If you're willing to give that tithe to God of your life, to Him, that His blessings will come it'll be like a flood. It'll be like Noah's Ark, but in a good way, right? Instead of destroying us, it'll literally will lift us up and we'll float on the top of God's blessings for the rest of our life. These are God's words through the prophet Micah. I will send out my blessings so abundantly that nothing will be able to contain them. And so as we have reached now Stewardship Sunday, and as I said, we've all received our stewardship packets. I know I received mine this week as well. I want each of us to consider how God has blessed us and how we can respond to that blessing in a proportional way. Can you give 10%? That would be great. That's the biblical minimum. If you can't, can you give 5%? Can you give 2%? We're asking all of the parishioners to consider giving at least 2% this year of your income. And I know this is a change from how stewardship has been approached. But I want us to get used to having this idea of response as opposed to obligation and duty. That God has blessed us, and we have to give some of that back. Not have to, but that in our gratitude, in our joy of receiving these gifts, we want to give that back to Him. Knowing that this will lead to our life being connected to Him, and that His blessings will continue to come upon each and every one of us. So please prayerfully take your stewardship packets, and maybe some of you have brought them back today, and God bless you if you have. Think about it. Pray about it. Talk about it as a family. Be serious about it. And offer to God the stewardship as you see fit. As God has blessed you, so you too can bless God. Think about that. Stewardship is our opportunity that God has blessed us. Now we are blessing God through our stewardship as well. So let's not be afraid of stewardship. Let's not be afraid to give of ourselves, because so many blessings come from it. And without it, we're left like a stick with no water. We can't grow. There's nothing that can come from that. So may God bless each and every one of you and enlighten you on your stewardship pledge this year. And may God also bless our community, that through the healthy stewardship of all of our parishioners, we can not only keep the lights on, which for some reason we find that to be like the goal of having a church, is to like keep the doors open and keep the lights on, but to make an impact, to take the stewardship that we receive and to go out into the world and let people know that God is here, and that if they come here, they're going to find Him here. That should be our goal. And with your stewardship and all of our stewardship together, we absolutely can do it. May God bless you all.